Welcome to Out of the Best Books, where we pull a book from our Deseret Book Library and let it inspire insightful conversations for the curious believer in the gospel of Jesus Christ. I'm Sarah Collins.
And I'm Cole Wissinger, and we are part of Deseret Books' podcast team. We're hosting this new show because of the stories around people leaving faith, and we want to highlight those that stay and those that struggle and those that want to believe.
Right, the people we know, they're engaged and they are believers. They're having insightful conversations, and that's our goal, is to continue the dialogue. Take it from the church foyers and into your living room. And since we have access to a library of the best books, let's have these conversations behind the mic.
This is Out of the Best Books by Deseret Book.
Today we're jumping into something that I feel is right up our alley. It's what Cole and I have actually had many conversations about this. It's all about asking this crucial question of our faith. Why does this church matter? We're encouraging the wrestle, which is something that I love to discuss, and hopefully this will change how we study the Doctrine and Covenants, and not only that, but the wider take that we have on the restoration.
The perfect person to have this conversation with is Steven Harper. He is a professor of church history and doctrine at Brigham Young University. Steven helps his students develop resilient faith and is passionate about them becoming lifelong disciples of the Savior. His book, Wrestling with the Restoration, Why This Church Matters, inspired today's conversation. Welcome, Steven.
Thank you. It's great to be with you both.
Oh, it's so good to see you.
So happy to have you here. Steve, let's just jump right into it. You've wrestled with this, honestly, massive question. Why does this church matter? Maybe give us some context. Why even start there? Why ask that question?
Well, the start of this for me comes out of a terrific entry in Joseph Smith's journal.
Okay.
It's November 1835, and he's being visited by this eccentric fellow from New York. And this guy claims some pretty remarkable spiritual experiences, and of course Joseph Smith does as well. So they're interested in comparing notes with each other. They're curious about each other. And in the process of telling this fellow his story, Joseph says that he thought it of the first importance that he should be right in matters that involve eternal consequences. So think about that line, right? I thought it of the first importance that I should be right in matters that involve eternal consequences.
Wow.
So that's how I feel. I am interested in my existence and in human existence. What's the nature of it? Are we do we descend in some way from God? Is there a God? If there's a God, is Jesus Christ the Son of God and the Savior of the world? If so, is Joseph Smith their chosen prophet? These are questions that are of eternal consequence, and I'm going to investigate them. Right? I mean, that's what I will do for my life. I'm going to find out. If finding out is possible, I'm going to find the answers to those questions, and I'm not going to stop until I know them. And then, of course, knowing the answers to them is not the same as then doing what is necessary. If those things are all true, then I need to make and keep sacred covenants in order to regain the presence of God. So that's the quest, right? To find out the things that are true, that involve eternal consequences, and then work hard to do them. Right, to become a lifelong disciple, a relentless repenter. To me, there's no meaning and purpose in life if I'm not pursuing ultimate questions.
Wow.
And doing ultimate things.
I mean, Sarah set it up. It's a big question. You gave us a big answer around that. If we can break into that, just because you broke it down very well, right? This leads to this and this leads to this. And so let's find where the This Church Matters piece, especially within the context of the restoration. As we study the Doctrine and Covenants this year, why is that one of the linchpins in all of the rest of the big things mattering in your search?
Yeah. As you both know, right, the trend right now is for Americans especially to be deciding, well, not only does this church not matter, but church doesn't matter, right? There's a migration away from church. This ebbs and flows throughout American history. I think people might be shocked to know that In the old days, we might think where everybody belonged to church. That really wasn't true, right? It was uncommon in the 18th and 19th century to, especially in parts of those, to have everybody be churched, right? The reason that there are awakenings in both the 18th and 19th century is because ministers are very, very concerned that their group of nuns, what we today call nuns, right? Nones, not N-U-N-S, that is essentially sort of migrating from church or churches, becoming unmoored to religion.
On the census, the no religious affiliation checkbox, like those guys, those are the nuns.
Yeah, exactly right. So we're hardly watching that happen for the first time. Okay. That has happened before. And just like it's exciting interest and efforts to curb that tide or whatever today, it's done that in the past. And this gives us what we often call a first great awakening, right? This leads us to maybe the most famous sermon in American history, Jonathan Edwards' Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, 1741. Well, a lot of your listeners will know that some historians use the term Second Great Awakening for the early part of the 19th century, right? Joseph Smith's, around the time of his birth, you see another wave of efforts to get Americans to come to church and to become churched. And, there are high points of church attendance and affiliation, and there are low points. And right now we're in an interesting wave where the number of people who are disaffiliated from or never have affiliated with a formal church is growing and bigger than it has been for a long time. So everybody in some way is asking the question, does church matter at all?
Why church?
Why church? And if so, why this church or that church, right? What difference does it make, if any at all? And my message for the whole world is church matters because Jesus is the Son of God and his church is the best one, right? And when I say that, I am not trying to say the other ones, what I call unrestored Christianity, a wonderful term I got from a Presbyterian scholar who's a fantastic scholar, not only of his own tradition and American religion generally, but of the restored gospel, right? In a joking way, he called it the unrestored gospel as compared to what you and I think of as the restoration, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So I am a lover of the unrestored gospel and of churches generally. And I find that in all of them, there is beauty. Whenever I can, I don't ever miss my own sacrament meeting or sacrament meeting anywhere to attend, but whenever I can, I attend somebody else's church. And I love it. There's nothing I enjoy more than doing that for all kinds of reasons. And we could talk about that. It might seem incompatible. Somebody might say, well, you can't love the restored version of Christianity and think it's the best one and then say it's okay to love unrestored versions too. Yes, you can, because I do, and a lot of other people do too.
Yeah.
And I'm not I don't feel conflicted about that. I don't feel like, well, any day now I might run the risk of joining the local Presbyterian congregation or something. I'll worship with them as often as I can, and I am planted in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints for reasons that are crystal clear to me, and that I would love to try to explain or help anybody else understand if they want to talk.
Well, I'd love to pick up on that because I think that when you're pointing out all these different there's these trends that people don't assume church matters, that you feel comfortable approaching other religions and the unrestored gospels that are out there. And my question is, why shouldn't we be afraid to wrestle then and address the history and face this thing head on? Because I think sometimes we shy away from it because we do have, I assume I already know this, or I don't know. I don't want to maybe get to the root of how I know what I know. It's a little fearful. Is that the right way? Is that okay to say, Steven?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. You
Okay.
put your finger right on it. And, a very prominent social psychologist has termed our time the anxious generation. There's lots of evidence
Yes.
to affirm that that's going on. And I mean, I can think of evidence in my own life, in my own family, and
Well, and sorry
others
to
too.
interrupt, but that's what these are matters of eternal consequence.
Exactly right. Right. So it's not a shock that we would have an anxious generation. But what I would like to say is, if we think that we have a monopoly on that, historically speaking, we don't. Think about Joseph's first vision accounts and how often he uses that word anxiety or related ones, right?
Absolutely.
Great anxiety. That's what he says he's suffering from. And it's precisely because he doesn't know what he most desperately feels like he needs to know. Right? Things have changed a lot. I'm not trying to say they haven't, but things have stayed the same a lot. In a sense, humans worry and fear and are anxious about the things they don't know, right? The uncertainties of our existence cause us to long for more certainty.
Absolutely.
And there are wiser, better, healthier ways to deal with that than others. And the best of all is to do what Joseph Smith did, to find God. Well, that's my story too. And I really want to know the answers to these questions. And I have found that Joseph Smith's version of the answers, that is what the Savior reveals through Joseph Smith the prophet, is the best set of answers to the most important questions that I've ever seen. And that's not from keeping my head in the sand about the tradition in which I was raised. I've got a PhD in American religious history with minor fields in, early modern Christianity and so forth, a fair amount of background in Old and New Testament era religion too.
The list is long.
I'm on a quest, and people need to take seriously religion outside of Christianity and so forth.
So you're saying why wrestle is because you'll find God. That's the pattern.
Right. If there's no God, then there's no wrestle. To me, if there's no God, then there's no purpose in the universe. Survival of the fittest. What does that even mean? Why survive? Who's more fit? Right. It's a concept with no real meaning. Survival means nothing. Okay, you survive 5 more years than the other animal. Okay, so what? Right? There's nothing to it. There's no purpose. And I'm sure you could find atheists and others who would argue against this. I'm not saying they don't have any arguments. I'm saying they're all hollow to me. If there's not a plan for salvation that goes beyond this world, then I'm not even sure why it matters that we have red lights and green lights and do unto others.
Yeah.
Maybe there is, but I don't see it.
So for those of us with shorter CVs than yours, where do we start in this wrestle, right? And you were at that point in some point in your life as well. Would you like to maybe just share personally how you started, and then maybe now your advice on how others can?
Yeah, so I'm a believing person by nature, right? I'm not an angsty, atheistic, or agnostic personality wondering if there really is a God. Now, there are lots of people like that, and I don't, that's not good or bad or here nor there. It's just not me. So you're asking my story. I come from a long background of believers, but also I relate very much to that Joseph Smith, who gives us the narrative of his teenage angstiness and anxiety. And the source of the anxiety is his personal sinfulness, right? And he says, look, I'm not guilty of greater malignant sins. That's not my nature. But I am in desperate need of God's forgiveness. Well, man, that's like my story. So that's probably why it resonates so much with me. But one of the great things about Joseph Smith is he would not pretend. He told Alexander Niebuhr and a few other friends, just weeks before they murdered Joseph Smith, he told them, I went to the Methodist meetings as a teenager. I went and I wanted to shout like the rest of the people who were being born again, but I could feel nothing. So here's a person who wants very, very desperately to find God's love and feel the redeeming love of Jesus Christ, but he also will not fake that. He will not make it up. He won't tell himself he's found it when he hasn't. So he's questing for it. He sincerely wants it, but he's also thinking slow in our terms, right?
Yes, I love this.
He's staying aloof from all these parties, right? He understands that his head is inclined to Presbyterianism because it makes the most sense to the observable facts, but he also understands that his heart is much more inclined to Methodism because it has a happier story for his salvation. And the very fact that he can discern that and differentiate it is metacognitive. He is aware of his own awareness. He's mindful of his own thought processes. This is what we mean when we say think slow. Joseph slows down. I used his 1835 account in my very first lesson in my Foundations of the Restoration class every semester because it's an ideal way to see how a person thinks when they're metacognitive, right? They're aware of their own thought process about their own epistemology, about their own knowing or lack of knowing. And it also is a good way to show that Joseph intentionally chooses his hermeneutic, his method of interpreting. He's purposeful, he's intentional. So I keep holding him up as a person who was really, really good at wrestling. This wrestle that you and I are talking about, Joseph Smith is fantastic at showing us how to do it. Right? And it's valuable to learn to get with Joseph Smith long before he knows what the true gospel is, right? Before he ever knows there's a restored gospel, he is studying versions of the unrestored gospel. He even tells us in his 1832 autobiography, he says, I considered the deism, the deistic story of the universe, right? There's a God, he made these stars and moon and so forth. And if that's true, then Joseph has an answer to his anxiety and fears and concerns of his sinfulness, because if deism's right, then there was no fall of Adam and Eve, and there's no need for redemption. Right? He can get over that idea that he's a fallen mortal and going to be accountable to God for his sins. And he can just go the way that Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin did and say,
there goes your anxiety, right?
Yeah. John Locke, right? I'm a pretty good person, and there really is no Judeo-Christian story of fallenness and need for redemption, and that absolves the need for finding Christ and so forth. So he flirts with that, but it doesn't work for him. He is metacognitive. He's aware of his thought processes. He's mindful of himself. He's pretty good at telling the truth to himself. A lot of us are not good at that. Many of us, part of our fast thinking problem, a big part, is cognitive distortions. We tell ourselves things about ourselves and others that are not true. And learning to think slow means learning to identify those distortions and sort of expose them to the light, right? Shine a light on them and evaluate them and ask, is that really true?
Right.
Are these familiar terms to you guys or not?
Yes, absolutely. It's kind of bringing like the allegory of the cave to my mind of like what, and you've mentioned this in your book too. What you see is all there is
Right.
a false way of thinking, or maybe false way is not even the right way to say it, but that's the value and why we got to think slow and get comfortable with the wrestle. I think that, Stephen, correct me if I'm wrong, but like in today's world, it's really hard to think slow. We can get access to things so much faster. And I guess, how do people balance that? Because if I have a question about something I'm wrestling with in church history, I can find an answer. I can Google it. I can look it up or even read it in Saints. You know, we have a lot of resources, both good and bad for it. So what do we do to wrestle, think slow, and maybe be comfortable with what I see right here is not everything that it is?
This is a really, really important question, because until we learn to think slow, it won't matter whether we can put our fingers on the accurate information or not, right? So the question is, well, how do I find the right information? Well, that's a relatively easy answer after you've learned to think about information right. But if you don't ever learn to think about information right, then it doesn't matter if you're sitting on top of the Joseph Smith papers. You don't know how to think. So what do we mean by that? Well, we're basing everything we're talking about on Professor Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow. He spent his life as a psychologist. He won prestigious prizes for his brilliant work, he and his colleagues. And thinking fast is simply sort of the default setting that we have. And it means that you use heuristics. You use shortcuts, mental shortcuts to arrive at conclusions. So, for example, the Super Bowl just got over. And during the Super Bowl, as with any sports cast where there's a commentator, right? The commentator will give explanations for why things happened the way they did. And sometimes it will be a perfect example of a heuristic, meaning you're trying to answer a complex question that would require a massive amount of data and analysis, and you don't have time for that. So you just give an answer and it satisfies people. But if you examined it very carefully, if you analyzed it, you'd realize there was nothing to that.
You're now speaking Cole's language, sports.
Correct.
Yeah, and sometimes they accidentally come across the right answer, but in the wrong way, right? Because there is so much more going on in that sports analogy that we can never know. Like, until you talk exactly through what the coaching was supposed to be and what their rules were going to be on each individual thing, you cannot nail down whose mistake it was that led to whatever it was that happened.
Well said, right? There's always more to it. The answer is more complex.
Yeah.
Well, humans are capable of slowing down and finding many of the answers to those complex questions, but not in our default setting. In our default setting, we trade the complex question itself for a simple question. We answer the simple question, and then we convince ourselves that we just answered the complex question. And we don't think metacognitively about doing that at all. We just do it in an instant. In the book, Thinking Fast and Slow, Professor Kahneman says that he and his colleagues have sampled many groups of 100 people and said, "Are you an above average driver?" And always they get about 90% of people say, "Yeah, I'm an above average driver."
That's a pretty good average.
Yeah, not bad, right? This is a way that he illustrates what fast thinking is and how it works. If you ask the three of us if you're an above average driver, I don't want to take the time to go find the data and analyze it. I'd have to get your help anyway to do math and stuff, and I don't want to do that. So I'm just going to trade the complex question for a simple one in my head. Well, I haven't had a ticket for 6 months. Yeah, I'm an above average driver. And that practice of trading the complex question for a simple one, answering the simple one, and creating the cognitive illusion that I now know the answer to the complex question, that is heuristic thinking. That is fast thinking. And that's what almost all people do about just about everything, and including thinking about the important questions of faith. And that is fine if you're going to comment on a football game. It is not fine if you're on the quest to find ultimate answers to ultimate questions. You got to slow down. You got to learn to identify the cognitive distortions that you're telling yourself and the illusions. One of the most common illusions, as you said, is what I see is all there is. What I think I know about the first vision is all there is to know. What I think I know about God is all there is to know. And that has the effect of course, completely putting the brakes on any humble inquiry for more, right? And of course, the information age didn't turn us into heuristic fast thinkers. Humans have been doing this since they've been humans, but it has had this effect of enhancing the cognitive illusion that what I see is all there is. I did a Google search. I mean, I went through the first 3 hits, and now I must know all there is to know about whatever topic. Well, that's an illusion. That's not the truth.
I think maybe another underappreciated facet of that information age is that it keeps us seeking more fast knowledge, which limits our time to take the time that it takes to think slower, because we're always looking, we can get so much, we can get the quantity of fast stuff that we never get the quality of anything in the slow way.
The age-old thing, quality versus quantity.
Amen. This is the New Testament point, right? You can be ever learning and never come to a knowledge of the truth. Yeah, that's exactly what heuristic thinking is. Ever learning, or giving yourself the illusion that you're learning stuff, but never coming to a knowledge of the truth. So to get back to your question, we've got to learn how to think slow, and then we'll be perfectly able to think about the things, right? In other words, there's no point having a stack of historical documents in front of somebody if they don't know how to think about them. But once they do, those documents are easy to hand. They're more accessible now than they've ever been. So one way to do that is to, first of all, get in our head what a historical fact is. And this, people might be thinking, okay, I'm not going to turn this guy off. I can't believe how pedantic this fool is. And maybe they've got a good point there. But
No, because you are breaking down, like, thinking slow. This is what we need to learn.
Yes. A fact, when I use the word fact, when a historian uses the word fact, they mean something that itself is a little a shorthand way of saying a piece of knowledge that is verifiably the same regardless of what perspective you take on it.
Okay.
No matter how a person interprets it, it's the bedrock piece of information. So, for example, a historian cannot prove or disprove whether God exists or doesn't exist, right?
It's not verifiable.
It is not verifiable using historical method.
Okay.
So when a historian says fact, they mean, well, there's a book called the Bible, and it testifies that there is a God.
That's verifiable.
Right. And half the historians might believe that Bible tells the truth about God, and half of them might believe that it doesn't. But they all agree completely that there's a book, and it's called the Bible, and it says so-and-so about God. That's a fact. The fact is what is verifiably true and the same, regardless of how I decide to interpret it. This is absolutely critical because people need to know that there is a great difference between facts and interpretations of the facts. So fact, I hope that will stick, that definition will stick, and I hope people will become much, much better at slowing down their thinking and differentiating the facts from opinions about the facts. If you want to see someone treat you well in helping you see the difference between the facts and interpretations, Richard Bushman's biography of Joseph Smith is extremely good at this. Bushman is a very skillful historian, and he's good at sort of dumping the facts out onto the page and then analyzing them and then coming up with an interpretation. He moves from one of those to the next. Well, not all historians or biographers are as good. Some of them intentionally want to blur the distinction for you and me between facts and interpretations. And others folks just don't know the difference. Okay, so facts are one kind of knowledge, and we want to get really good at thinking slowly enough to differentiate the facts from interpretations. Right? A long time ago, Richard Turley, who was also very good at understanding all this, he did an interesting exercise with me, and I've done it since with groups of students and others. So do you guys want to run through this exercise?
Oh, yeah. I love it.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to start feeding you facts. These are verifiable facts, okay? The facts are that some early church records say that there was a man and a woman, and they were engaged to be married. Okay, you got that?
Okay.
Some early church records say there was a man and a woman, they were engaged to be married. And then these records say that a very high-ranking authority told this woman that she was to have his child instead, and she became pregnant. Mm-hmm. And this authority sent a message to the man that said he should marry her anyway and raise the child as his own. Okay? This is in early church records.
Okay.
What are you thinking now? Analyze your feelings, your blood pressure level, right? Your heart rate, your thoughts.
Shock.
Okay.
Maybe even a bit of disgust.
Yeah. Is this, this seems like the supreme example of unrighteous dominion from one point of view, right? Cole, do you know the story I'm talking about? You got
it may sound a little analogous to the story of the Savior being born.
I just told you the Christmas story.
Yeah.
And the way I did it was to just tell you the facts.
Yeah.
I didn't put any meaning to them.
Right.
Right. But you and I were reading meaning into them.
Yeah.
Right. That was making us disturbed, shocked.
Yeah.
We were reading. It's because we were reading meaning. Now, when we read the Christmas story, I'm guessing we don't think, I can't believe it. That is the most outrageous example of unrighteous dominion I've ever seen. I'm going to file a protest against Almighty God for thinking that things should be done in this way, right?
It even proves that the presentation of the facts can itself be interpretations thereof.
That's
like
right.
the way you are implying some interpretation even in the way that you present them.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Or context too. We were talking about church history. My brain didn't go. You said early saints.
No, I didn't. You heard early saints.
Oh, okay. See, that's what I'm saying. I'm in some mindset of the I'm thinking of church restoration, the gospel of the 1830s, right? Like that's where I was historically.
Yeah. So in other words, you and I were thinking fast, and I'm not. You're not like. We're not different from the rest of people. This is what people do.
Yep.
And instead, that's our default setting. And we have to get good at saying, I'm going to slow down on purpose. I have to work hard to slow down.
Yeah, you do.
Right? And
unless you're Cole. I guess Cole figured it out right away.
He started smiling about halfway through, and I thought maybe he was on to
I've heard a riddle or two in my day.
Yeah, but it was good that we also were thinking, wow, I don't know about this. We were, this is the normal kind of response to this, and it illustrated that what you see is not all there is, right? We just saw a few things, and we then assumed some things, and we thought we knew more than we did. And the minute that a new fact came to our attention, that's the Christmas story. It changed everything, right? We needed one more fact to change the way we were feeling and thinking. Our thinking went essentially from this is a great story of unrighteous dominion to this is the story of God's ultimate condescension to save and love his children. And that hung on another piece of knowledge that we didn't have. And when people think fast, they don't realize that there are known knowns. There are things they know that they know. There are things that are known unknowns, things I know that I don't know yet, right? Evident or information I don't have, but it could be known if I did some more work. And then the biggest, most elusive category is the unknown unknowns. What is it that we don't know that we don't know?
Yeah.
Well, a person who makes a final decision about everything related to God and Christ and the restoration without taking into account that, hey, there are unknown unknowns and there are even known unknowns, right?
Yeah.
I wrote a book about the first vision, and it has a chapter in it that includes the story of Sandra Tanner. Sandra Tanner has since made a long and somewhat prestigious career of opposing the church, fighting against the restoration. And this tells the story of the early days of when she left her own faith in the restoration, and it features the way that she had some unknown knowns, right? There were things that were knowable that she just didn't know yet. And she didn't realize that or think about that. Now, that's true for all of us. I'm just using her as an example because it's well documented. The book will tell it. And these are her own records that tell us, her own autobiographical memories triangulated with a few other things. Okay, so she's not different from us. All of us could go that direction if we don't learn to think slow. And it takes humility to recognize, I bet there are a lot of things out there that I don't know. And then it takes a determined seeker's, faithfulness to the truth to say, I'm going to go find them out. I'm going to work hard until I find them out. And what's happening is that we're in a time where we've been conditioned to be shocked, right? We're shocked by some new fact, and we assume we know things we don't know, and we make rash decisions before we've done the work to find out what the truth is. And you won't find the people who are the most knowledgeable, right, who've spent a lifetime studying these things, thinking slow about them. They're not the ones who are making a big deal on the internet about how fast they're getting out of the church. In other words, it's not the people who know the most. It's the people who don't understand this process and are shocked by some new news. And I'm not saying they're not sincere. I'm not saying they're not seriously disturbed or troubled, nor that I'm not trying to argue they shouldn't be. Mm-hmm. But I am saying that they're not the ones who know the most. Okay? In some ways, it's knowing too little instead of too much about church history and the restoration that sets you up for feeling disillusioned.
So if the context is so important and the people that are educated on it are mostly staying, as you said, it doesn't get a lot more educated than you, and you are here and you are planted. But every day we get further and further away from 1830, from those days. So if that context is so important, how do we figure it out as we just trudge through time and get further from that context? You mentioned the Super Bowl analogy. It's very easy to go and actually figure out what the full story was because it was well documented. We have 14 different camera angles of every single thing that happened that day. So we can go back and think slow about that. Not so about the first vision, the restoration, these things that do cause trouble and disturbance from people.
Yeah, so here's what you got to do. Even if you wanted to try to figure out exactly what happened with that, with the Super Bowl, you would notice that you had less evidence than you might think, right? One thing you can hardly do is get inside people's head. You might think, sure you can. No, I got 4 hours of them on tape, or we did an interview with them after the game. Okay, so what you have then is a slice. You have some pieces, but you still only have 100 pieces of a 1,000-piece puzzle. Well, that's true for Joseph Smith and the Restoration too, right? I've got a few pieces of the big puzzle, and I have to try to figure out what the puzzle looks like. What do they mean? What does it mean when this puzzle is all together? Well, it's very, very, very good if I start with the knowledge that I only have a few pieces of this puzzle. That's an important, slow thinking, a bit of awareness, right? The known knowns, the known unknowns, and I need to realize there are a lot of unknown unknowns that I do not have. And if I assume I do, then then I have a cognitive illusion. It's the illusion that what I see is all there is. Well, much better to start with every question, every wrestle by realizing what I see is not all there is. Now, this might make us super anxious, and because uncertainty is an anxiety producer. And if we're going to think slow, we have to get good at recognizing there are a lot of unknown unknowns, and I'm not going to know what they are. I'm always going to have to leave room for lots of uncertainty there. I'm going to quest for the knowable unknowns, right? I'm going to go on a hunt, a systematic hunt for everything that can be known about this topic that I don't know yet. I'm going to turn over every stone and go to whatever lengths are required. And that doesn't matter if it takes me more than a 5-minute Google search. I could go 25 years. I'd go 50 years, right? The truth has to mean enough to us that we are vested that sincerely and diligently that we're not in a hurry. Okay. If we can cultivate those attributes, then they will help us to have more faith. Right? Because what we're asking here is to have faith that while I'm looking for certain knowledge, I can believe the things that I have now. The few things that I know, I can bank on those. And if we'll do it that way, we'll find that faith will grow. The basis for that faith will grow, and it'll become very, very deeply, firmly rooted and grounded. So for me, that's the Book of Mormon. My gosh, there's a big piece of evidence in the Book of Mormon, right? It's available. It's not elusive. I can read it every day. And it either what it claims to be or it isn't. And the best way for me to find that out is to read it often and pray about it diligently, act on its precepts, right? If what Alma tells me to do, that Alma 32 is right and good, then the fruits that he predicts will grow out of it. Right. If what Moroni tells me to do at Moroni 10 is a good, a solid way of knowing, then good fruit will grow out of it, right? If what Joseph told me is true, that I will get nearer to God if I abide by the precepts of that book than in any other way, then that will be vindicated. I will grow closer to God by exercising faith in Christ, repenting of my sins, getting baptized to make a covenant with God, take upon myself the name of Christ, and then being faithful to that covenant. Well, that has proved true. Every single one of those proved true for me. And so that I know that now. I have certainty, right? I don't know the meaning of all things, but I sure do know that God loves his children and that he sent me a book. And I know that book claims to have been translated by Joseph Smith. And so now I'm right. You can see how it goes, right?
Yeah.
And it plants you firmly when you think slowly about it and go that direction.
It's a key piece that we probably, as we've talked about, you have this quote, you said we must investigate and interrogate and internalize, and you're talking about the first vision in this quote, but whatever it is we're wrestling with, right?
That's right.
And then you said this, we must seek and receive revelation to tell us what they say actually happened. I started that quest 30 years ago, and I have no intention of stopping. And close quote from you. I love the key piece of being revelation. We can seek all these things, and then we have to pair God with all of this in the end, right? Ultimately. And Steven, maybe this is a good place to wrap up. You've already expressed this in so many different ways as we've had this conversation today, but would you mind reiterating, why does this church matter to you, Steven Harper?
Well, the reason this church matters to me above all is that it offers the fullness of the gospel of Jesus Christ. What that means in other terms is that you could go to lots of other versions of Christianity and find your way back to heaven, right? A heaven that surpasses all understanding. Doctrine and Covenants, section 76 says, right? And I could be quite content with that if I didn't know that there was a fuller gospel. And the fuller gospel that the Lord restored through Joseph Smith is that my heavenly parents, right? That is delicious. And that's not in any of the unrestored versions of Christianity. My heavenly parents created me and my wife in their image, and they want us to be like them, and they want to give us everything they have. We could inherit their fullness, and we could become like them, meaning we could perpetuate our posterity forever and ever and have plans for their happiness. Well, that is, for many people who don't believe in the restored gospel, that is blasphemous and repugnant and awful. For me, it is just the opposite. It is the height and glory of godliness, and the covenants and ordinances that bring it to pass through Christ were restored by Jesus Christ to Joseph Smith the prophet, and they reside right now in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and the very same keys of the priesthood vested in Joseph Smith by ministering angels are now vested in President Russell M. Nelson. And he is active at inviting all of us to partake of all the blessings and inviting us to help everyone else to come and partake. So to me, the church matters not because it's perfect, not because it has the best hymnal, not right. There are lots of things I would love to see, right? Different. Those are tangential things that are of no consequence. The church matters to me because it considers it of the first importance, that it should be right in matters that involve eternal consequences. You can see people sort of yapping around at President Nelson's heels about doing this and doing that, or changing this or changing that. And President Nelson stays pretty laser focused on what is at the heart of the restoration. In fact, I would say he has done a wonderful job of helping me and many, many other people see that this is all about taking upon ourselves the name of Christ by covenant and being true and faithful to covenants until we find ourselves back in the presence of our heavenly parents with the fullness of their blessing. So it matters to me because it is to me, it's of the first importance that I should be right in matters that involve eternal consequences. And this is the church that has the exact same way of thinking about that as I do. And I'm grateful for it. And I'm in it all the way. And I invite everybody else to. And I'm happy to help anyone who is struggling. I understand why it would be not unusual or weird or troublesome, to wrestle with these things. The wrestle doesn't make you weird or anomalous or unwelcome or anything else. Let's wrestle together, not against each other, with each other. The restoration is worth it.
Wow. Very beautifully said. Thank you, Steven Harper.
Thank you.
Wrestling with the Restoration, Why This Church Matters, is available at Deseret bookstores now or on the Deseret Bookshelf Plus app, where you can find a lot of these great books, and Steven mentioned a lot of other study material. If we are going to start engaging in this wrestle, then it is going to take knowledge, and one of the best sources of knowledge is great, fantastic, really the best books. This is out of the best books.